All right, well, with that, questions from the audience.
What are 5 things that a homeowner or a property or business owner could do to be ready? What to not be complacent? What could the individual do?
What could an individual do?
What could a homeowner or a business do?
First and foremost, have flood insurance. I know a lot of people who they're behind the flood protection system, and they're in Zone X, and and when you're in Zone X, it's a very modest fee, $500 a year for flood insurance, and a lot of people don't want to pay that, and that's a huge mistake because your typical homeowner's insurance will not cover flood damages, water damages. So the very first thing that you could do would be have flood insurance, so you're covered from catastrophic loss. And some other things that you could do is seriously look at how you could re-look at your building and get things out of the floodway. Perhaps filling in your basement, perhaps raising your utilities up so that if floodwaters would occur, all of your major expensive utilities, they're above the base flood elevation, and so you're intact.
Know where you're going. So when the flood is coming, you got to know where you're going. And so have a place where you know you can go. Think about how you would be able to prepare yourself to get the belongings you want to keep so they can go with you. Plan that. Try to think about that. So if you have certain documentation that's in the basement and you kind of go, well, it's over here, I'm not quite sure, it's in 15 different folders, learn to consolidate it. So you could take your most important possessions that you will need, and then from there, practice and know where you're going. Because when the flood's coming and they put the gates up and Market Street is closed, and if your evacuation plan is to try to get over the river, you may not be able to do that. A bridge could fall. So think about evacuating on your own side of the river. Make sure you do have a place to go. Because I did talk to people, well, we could just go across Pierce Street Bridge, and I said, well, if that goes, how are you going to do that? Well, I didn't think about that. Well, I got a friend up in Harvey's Lake. Okay, at least you got something now. Backup plan. So think about what you need. How fast can you get that? And that's what I mean, practice. How fast can you evacuate what you really want to a location off the floodplain if you were told to evacuate? And really practice that. Practice it with your family members or your community members. You can't take your house, but you can take some of your stuff. So that's what, we're up to 4?
I've got one more. Okay. One of the things that the authority is involved with is the Pennsylvania Silver Jackets project. The Pennsylvania Silver Jackets, it's a consortium of representatives from the National Weather Service, NOAA, the Corps of Engineers, FEMA, PEMA, and it's called the Susquehanna River Flood Inundation Modeling Project. And essentially it's from Sunbury up to the Lackawanna County border. But what this is, they took that revised hydraulic information that I referred to before, and they're going to provide, it's going to be a graphical maps that you'll be able to access through your computer. It's not just for local public officials, it's also for members of the public. So if there's going to be a flood threat in the future, and the approximate flood stage, you can go to this site, you can actually see your home. It's got roads. It'll be highly detailed. It's just like a photograph. It's an aerial map, and you can see how the flood risk will affect your property. So you can make the decision as to whether you have to move your cars, you have to get objects up to the upper floors of the house, or if you have to evacuate. And that's going to be a very important public safety tool that all of us can use if there's going to be a potential flood risk.
When will that be online?
That should be online in the spring. We're working with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They have a private contractor who's going to upload the information to the National Weather Service. It's called the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service website. It's where you actually see the hydrograph of the Susquehanna River. If ever you go to the stream gauge on the North Street Bridge, You'll see the hydrograph of the river. You'll be able to access that information there, and it's going to be a very important public safety tool.
It's on my phone.
Excellent. That's number 5. Good job.
It's on mine too, yes, right.
What event had more total rainfall over the watershed, 72 or 11?
Well,
What I'm asking is, you said that the flow rate was greater at 11 than it was in 72. And I don't understand why that would be, because I think there's more water over the watershed in 72 than there was at 11. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Go ahead.
I think what happened in 11, I think the majority of the storm was a little bit towards the east of the valley. In upstate New York, the Corps of Engineers, they've got these very large stormwater retention basins, and a number of them were bypassed in the Tropical Storm Lee. If the storm had been a little bit more towards the west, those stormwater detention basins would have come into play, and I don't think we would have had as a large of an event that we had back in September of 11.
So you're hitting on a point here, is the path matters. Exactly, the path of the storm does matter and indicates what we see here. So when you look at the actual storm event, it's a large watershed. So how the rain goes over and when it goes over and whether it goes over twice could impact what we see. Also, if you look at the amount of impervious area from 72 to current, or 2000, it's probably more. And so more moves off that watershed and into the river itself. So there's a lot of factors to try to determine a flood at this particular point. It's more than just the actual rainfall. The rainfall is certainly the end, but it's also how much infiltrates into the ground, how much can be stored, the travel time for that runoff event to get into the river, and when all that comes together to see what we see at Wilkes-Barre.
Why did the dike break in 44?
Why did the
Why
dike
did
break?
the dike break in 44? What caused that break in the dike?
It was overwhelmed.
Was it over top?
It was overwhelmed. It was overtopped. Same thing happened on Riverside Drive here in Wilkes-Barre, just right down, just a few blocks away.
So you're talking about Agnes.
Yeah, so the water went over the top
It
and then
went over the top.
Yeah,
It was
so
caused
then-
it to fail.
And then it
Yeah.
rose the
So
backside.
it didn't break if the water came over the top and then whatever.
Yeah, the forces of water are just enormous, because when the waters came over the flood wall, of course it's coming crashing down on the land side of the flood wall, and it's just eroding the soil, and it just, and so you lost your passive resistance, and it was just overwhelmed.
So then the water height of the river coming through 44 was about 32 feet then? The height was gushing right through at that point after it peeled it back and, peeled back the dike and so we had that water coming from the river from 40 feet or whatever, actually coming through at
It wouldn't be-
32 feet?
Yeah, I think the high water mark was just a little shy of 41 feet,
Yeah.
40.96 or some number like
But
that.
that's from base level. So it wouldn't be a wall of 40-foot water, it would be whatever from the base of the levee.
22 feet is the flood stage.
Yes,
And so
right.
you're looking at 20 feet up or so
Right.
of water.
So it wasn't hydraulic pressure, you're saying?
What's that?
It wasn't the hydraulic pressure in the change of the soil? Because I had people that worked at the cemetery said that the soil.
Boiled
was-
up?
It was just liquid when they were
But you're
trying to
talking
work.
about 11, right?
No.
Or 72?
72, people that were at the cemetery.
When you look at the hydraulics of this, the water travels from the river, goes underneath the levee, depending on exactly how, and this is a little bit of what happened to Katrina too. And yeah, it could boil up on the other side, okay? And one way we try to alleviate that is to put as much material on it as possible, okay, to hold that back, but it also changes the hydraulic status across the levee itself. So you're dealing with a hydraulic function here. If it tops over, it erodes the backside. So the wall is being partially held on the backside. When this erodes away, it goes. That's what happened in Katrina. A lot of those levees topped because they were eroded on the backside. The walls could not hold up the hydraulic pressure anymore. So there's a number of ways that a levee could actually fail. Okay? It could be from underneath. And if you don't stop that movement of water from underneath, it actually could start pushing it faster and faster. Yes, you could fluidize the soil on the other side. It becomes effectively liquefied. And then, yeah, you could rupture your levee that way. If it tops over the top, it erodes the backside. It doesn't have the back support to hold it anymore. It falls completely over. So there's multiple ways that they could fail.
Yeah, there are portions of the flood protection system that lie over pervious seams in the soil mass. I mean, if you've ever been to Kirby Park, you might have seen those inverted trash cans. Well, those are called relief wells, and they are very important to the integrity of an earthen levee. During a high water event, water will try to seek its own level. So you'll have water will try to seek its path through these pervious seams, come up on the landslide of levee and come up. What these wells do, they're actually 40 to 70 feet in the ground, and they actually intercept these pervious seams, and there's a well screen there. And so they intercept the water that's trying to come through the levee and below the levee and come up to the landslide, and they intercept the seepage, and because of the hydraulic gradient, they come up as well just like a geyser. Mm-hmm. But they are extremely important to the integrity and stability of the levees. Mm-hmm. We have about 130 in our system.
Mm-hmm. It's a controlled flood at that point. We try to, when you look at certain systems, they are designed to allow some of that hydraulic pressure to be relieved. That's controlling the flood the best we can. We don't use that term anymore. We now call it flood management. We learned long ago we can't actually control, but that's still some of these old terms that are out
We
there.
heard in 11 that if you see that water coming through and it's clear, it's a better sign than if it's muddy.
Well, that's correct. I mean, like if it's muddy, then there's probably some silty material that's being washed away from the levee mass, and that's not good. Mm-hmm. And how you combat that is weight. Just get a lot of weight to try to pile it on top to try to counteract the unbalanced hydrostatic forces.
Mm-hmm. In that regard, how close were we in 44 and 11 with that, where they were putting massive weight near the sports complex?
Well, like one of the things that we do whenever there's going to be a major flood event is, the flood stage in the Wyoming Valley is 22 feet, and when you get up to about 30 feet, that's when we really mobilize. We have about 20 closure structures in our system we have to throw up. The most significant one is the Market Street Bridge. There's like 70 sluice gates we have to close. But also at that time, we initiate levee patrols. So we have trained people who go out, they're constantly looking for trouble spots. And what occurred in 2011 is that during the levee patrols, we encountered some boiling occurring in the 44 cemetery and also in the recreation complex, but we were able to immediately respond.
Do we have anything in place now, instead of depending on a private contractor to put soil or whatever you would call on that bubbling or whatever you call that seepage that comes up, boils? Do we have, I don't understand why we had a private contractor do that and not a system in place where that would be handled, if something's going to happen in the future. That's what, I don't know.
Well, in the time of emergency, you're getting help from whatever source you can find, whether it's from FEMA, the National Guard, private contractors to come in to save the valley.
Well, is there a system in place now where, something could be done to control those bad spots in there? So, because we're probably fairly close to having the levee breach at that point, weren't we?
No. It's it's part of the repairs from Tropical Storm Lee. A stability berm was installed not only in the 44 recreation complex but also in the cemetery.
So we don't have anything in place now. There's not something.
Yes, there's something in place now. The stability berm that was added as part of the repairs to Lee.
Yeah.
Is West Pittston ever gonna get a dike?
In my lifetime, I'd have to say no.
Were they ever close to getting a levee? Was it ever considered by the Army Corps to build one there?
I think back in the early phases of the design, back in the 80s, I think it was considered. I wasn't around then. I'm really not sure. But going forward, I just don't see that happening. It's, one of the questions I'm asked very frequently is, well, when's going to be the next levee raising project? I got to say, never. Because it's, to go up, you have to go up, but also you have to go out wide because you have to have the stability. And you're talking about interfacing structures like our pump stations or the sluice gates, closure structures. So at first blush, it might sound very easy, but it's a very extremely expensive project. And I just don't think there's political will in the valley for a levee raising project to occur. No one wants to take on that debt anymore. So that's why I think it's very important that communities learn to live with the risk along the river and learn to be and train themselves to be resilient.
I wonder if I could jump in to ask your observations. Certainly since '72, the demographics of the area have changed, or where people live. And you mentioned when you talk about the levy fee, which is a great deal for the money we pay for it. But
I want to shake your hand.
It's a wonderful deal. There is the sense of collective responsibility is somehow gone. And because you don't distribute, I don't see, if I live in the back mountain, for example, I don't see myself as really engaged in terms of the flood risk down. Somebody told me to throw that, boy, I'm glad I don't live down here. Well, part of that awareness, what we learn seems to come from, we get detached now. So the concern about the levee is really the concern of the folks who live down here, not folks who live at other places. So I'd like without getting into the politicalness of that all, whether we have lost some collective awareness of responsibility in that process as a community.
I think I've got to share your concern. It's when the former Board of Commissioners decided to take the authority budget out of their budget back in 2009. I think they made a public safety. It caused a public safety threat because then the authority, being authority through the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Act, we were allowed to enact a fee for our flood protection services, which I have to give the former executive director who's sitting right here, Jim Brzezina, and the authority board members at the time. They scrambled, they put together a levy fee package that we essentially use to today. But essentially it's because of the law, the statutes, we can only apply the fee to properties who directly benefit from our flood protection services. So you're talking about, since the existing flood protection system was designed to prevent the occurrence of an Agnes flood, that's our service area, and that's about 15,000 properties. And that's not a lot when you're talking about flood protection services and you're trying to fund an operation and try to protect the valley. I thought back in 2019, taking the authority budget out of the county's budget was short-sighted.
This gentleman in the back here.
Thank you. So, just a little history. So in 1972, I was in the flood. I was 10 years old at the time. We lost everything. When we lived, my wife and I married and lived in 1996. We were evacuated. We lived in Riverside Park. 2006, we were evacuated again. And so then we finally made a decision, like, we better move out of the floodplain, so we did. And I'm just sometimes intrigued. I would just like to know your opinion. I know the colleges don't have much choice and so on, but you see $40 million buildings going up a block from the river. You see people with a decision to buy a home in Kingston or outside the floodplain. And so it does seem very minimized, and you oftentimes hear flood insurance. Do you agree with my take that if another Agnes-type flood did happen in like 72, that the valley would have a heck of a time recovering because of the tight money with the federal government and so on? So I guess what I'm just wondering is, like, if you had a loved one that was looking to buy a home, like, do you feel that there's enough protection from the levee that you're confident it may happen 50 years from now? Or do you think, like, I just wouldn't take the chance and wouldn't want to live by the river?
I think I can answer that very easy. My wife, Mindy, who's sitting right in front of you, we have a house in Kingston. We lived there for 20 years. We raised our kids there. I can't think of a finer community to raise our kids. I know how hard authority staff work to maintain and operate the system, and I can unabashedly say that we are ready to go for the next flood event. We will be able to respond effectively and do what we have to do to protect the Wyoming Valley. I think the development you see in our valley, it shows confidence in the future, confidence in how well the authority maintains the system, because if we didn't see this development, I think you'd see that otherwise. But I see people buying homes in the floodplain behind the flood protection system.
It seems to contradict a little bit your earlier statement, and you were quoted a couple years on the Times Leader. Like, you listed all the different reasons why it's more likely: more water flow, the sediment in the river. Like, so you kind of give 3-4 reasons why it's more likely to happen, and then you kind of give like a little bit of a narrative now that like you're totally confident. So it's just kind of like, sometimes I feel it's a conflicting message. I remember the Times Leader did an article, and they gave the computer models are projecting that it may happen, that the sediment in the river, you go over the Cary Ave, Plymouth, that bridge, it's like a forest. The trees are just scattered all throughout the river. So you read quotes from experts saying, get ready, but then like when you ask the decision, should I take out a $200,000 mortgage on this house next to the river? It's like, absolutely. There's no, we're prepared, we're ready to go. So it just seems like a little bit of a contradiction. At least as a citizen, just reading the comments, it just seems a little contradictory. Like, on the one hand, the computers, the others are saying we're in for possibly a tough go. But then on the other hand, absolutely buy there, absolutely, we're confident. So I'm just saying, it's not critical. I'm just saying I sometimes feel it's like a contradiction between the experts, what they say, but then the reassurance kind of absolutely, like, no problem building next to the river, So it's just my personal observation.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say there is people need to be aware of the increased flood risk along the river. We need to learn to live with it. We have an existing flood protection system. It was designed for an Agnes level flood event, but we later found that it withstood the stresses from a much larger flood event back in 2011. There could come a day sometime in the future where we could get a larger flood event than September 2011. It would be a very rare flood event, but I'm just saying that it could occur. And people should not be complacent. They should be aware of the risk that we have here in the valley, and learn to live with it and to be prepared.
When I first moved here 20 years ago, I was in the floodplain, and within a year, after learning about the area and the history, but I have the ability to move. I moved to the top of the mountain, and I've never had a problems with flooding. But I was able to move, and this is before I really knew about the history. I came here from Michigan, not that matters so much, but I came from outside the area. But I did. I evaluated the situation. At the time when I first came here, I was in the floodplain, renting, and I was deciding where to move. Part of my decision to move where I was to get off the floodplain. And I did. And I've been there ever since. But if people there's a lot of advantages to live in the valley too. I mean, I have a commute to get to work every day now. Okay? But all my stuff and my resources and my job are within the floodplain, and they can't move. So I have great confidence that if the event comes again, we are under the best possible protection we could be. That doesn't mean it will not top over or fail. That possibility is always there. Anywhere you live, you have that possibility. I came from snow country. At any time, when I had a 60-inch snow event, I really saw that. One event, 60 inches where I came from. That was a disaster for us, but I accepted it. I dealt with it. I got my car out. I got to work within 48 hours because Upper Michigan was prepared for that event, knowing it was coming. We're in the same situation here. But yeah, if you decide individually to move out of the floodplain, you have every right to do so. But also know that the levee system is here to protect as much as it possibly can.
If another Agnes event did happen, though, do you think the days of Dan Flood and the tremendous federal inflow of money, do you think the valley would have a tougher time recovering, even if you have the best plans, because of the way money is so tight these days?
I think the whole money issue will be very different than probably was in '72. I was 2 years old at the time, so I don't recall, and I wasn't here. But what I have known, looking at the economics of infrastructure over the last 20 to 30 years where I've been dealing with it, it seems to be harder and harder and harder to find the money to maintain what we need to maintain. You got to be taxed for this to some extent, whether it's a fee, a tax, whatever it is. You look at, the question of, does the whole community, well, we're all involved in supporting FEMA and, natural disasters. I mean, my insurance rates go up. I talked to them, why is it going up? So I haven't had a problem. Well, every time you have one of these big disasters, someone's got to pay for it, then it's got to be reimbursed somehow. And so we are all connected in a way. It's just how directly connected are we is the question. And that's it's a good point, is the fee is for the individuals behind the levee itself, but I certainly benefit from the levee because I got my job down here. So should I be contributing to that? It's a good question. Now, the law does restrict what could happen. And I've been a part of codes and engineering that needed to be changed. So if something needs to change the law, go make the point to try to change the law. There's a process to do that.
Where is this law set up? I mean, is this statewide, federal?
No, it's the authority was created under the Pennsylvania Municipal Authorities Act. And it's a set of statutes. And in the set of statutes, authority can charge a fee for services. And we offer flood protection services, but it has to be with the people, with property owners who actually benefit from our flood protection services. Mm-hmm. Now, the existing flood protection system was designed to prevent the reoccurrence of an Agnes level flood, and we know the Agnes floodplain. We know all the properties that are in it. It's about 14,000 to 15,000 properties, and those are the ones who get a bill from us every year. We can't charge someone who lives up in Dallas or Mountaintop because they are outside of our service area. And it would be illegal to try to charge them a fee for our services.
Unless he says he changed the law, right?
Unless the statutes are changed.
Or if the county had the will to include everyone or more. Could that happen at the county level?
I think the county enjoys not having to budget $2 million in their budget. So I mean, it's a possibility, but I don't see that happening.
It's a political will.
It's the political will.
Because as he said, I mean, there are a lot of people that benefit from not having downtown flooded, that work downtown, that have shop downs. I don't know. It's a very...
Well, the growth of the back mountain and the mountaintop was fueled by people leaving the valley after the flood. I mean, that's a great growth started.
In fact, the municipality of Kingston, they actually sued the authority when the levy fee was first enacted. And Judge Hughes, a number of years ago, Judge Hughes ruled in the favor of the authority that we acted properly in accordance with the act. That's right, he does.
Well, as a jumping off point, Brian, a gentleman mentioned earlier, yes, with the university, you are sort of hamstrung with your land and, where the donor necessarily wants things. But with some of the big buildings, I mean, Science Building comes readily to mind, How much did that play into the discussion? Or did it at all?
How much did what play?
Being right across from the river, and...
Being a part of the planning for that building, the decision to whether to build it or not based upon a potential flood event in the future, I don't recall ever that being part of the discussion. We wanted the campus, that's where the campus is, we needed the building, we wanted the building to look like that, and we found the funding to do that. And I'm on the first floor of that building.
Yes, you are.
And so if it goes, I will know with 24 hours before anybody else when I should be moving up to the 4th floor.
We should
Okay?
watch you then, right?
Yes. And people were. They were wondering what I was doing. I said, you just wait till tomorrow. But, yeah, should we make decisions with that in mind? Maybe. But I think the building probably will still be been built because the risk won't outweigh the benefit in that particular case.
I just wanted to throw in a little something when you were talking. After Katrina, New Orleans decided that they were going to have these green spots, which is where neighborhoods were that they thought would flood again. So they were going to change all of those to parks. However, a lot of people fought back on that, and so that didn't happen. So, you know, you can try and keep people from living there, but people are going to live there, basically. And it's mandatory to have flood insurance in New Orleans, and it is a lot more expensive than $500 a year.
I bet.
And a lot of that is due to FEMA and the cost and coming back, so.
Sometimes if I sit on my porch and I try to make decisions, you know, for the future or my son or whatever. I live in a town, it's West Pittston, and I don't have a lot of answers to my questions because it appears that a dike's not going to happen because it's just not cost effective. But what happens if we get another flood, or what happened in the last flood, the property values were cut in half. And you really don't know what to do. You don't know if you should just get out, stay. We're really in a pickle there because our tax base is going down, and the higher they raise the dike in Wilkes-Barre or Kingston, we get more water in West Pittston now than we did in '72. So, is there any answers to our problem in West Pittston? What do we do? Some people pay $5,000 worth of flood insurance on a house that prior to the flood it was worth $400,000. Now you can't get $200,000 for it. So we're really in a pickle. We really don't know what to do. And another question I have, are we prepared for ice jams? Because don't we have more floods, ice related and ice jams, instead of in the summertime when we get a lot of water? And is like, can't we get flooded in 2 hours? And, you know, what do we go? Do we stand on the top of the Market Street Bridge and throw dynamite there and blow it up? Well, you know, let the ice go through. And is the bridge in Wyoming susceptible for ice jams? Because there's 8 piers now instead of 4, and it's lower.
Which one do you want them to answer?
I don't know. Jump in anytime you want.
Well, I'll say that flooding can occur at any time of the year, winter, spring, summer, fall. It doesn't make a difference. It's with regard to ice jams, it's something that we watch during the winter, and if we think there's going to be if the ice is going to get jammed up and there's going to be a backwater effect, you know, there's mitigation techniques that we can work with the municipalities to try to alleviate that damming effect.
Do you actually throw dynamite in and blow it up?
In some cases, well, we haven't done it, but I know that some entities have, you know, controlled charges.
I just wondered, my ears.
But most of the high water events have been in September or June. That's when they
In
typically
spring,
happen.
typically the spring, fall.
The one I would tell, the one high water event in Susquehanna is probably the 36th flood, which is March. That's correct.
I think we
St.
have more,
Patrick's Day.
don't we have more floods with ice than we do with
No.
One,
In the top 5 crests, it's September, and then add June. There's
Yeah,
one,
I mean,
it's just
all the-
96 is the one.
yeah, I mean, all the top 5 crests, it wasn't isolated.
Was the Wyoming Bridge a mistake? Like, it is lower. It seems that, like, when you look back on it, like, was it?
Well, when you look at it, it's certainly lower than the old truss structure that was there. I know that the former executive director, who I replaced, he was trying to work with PennDOT to get them to see that, but I don't think they ever followed through with that on their final design. And I think because of how low it sits, I think there is some backwater effect during high water, which affects the upstream communities. And with regard to West Piston, I mean, it's as to other communities that are outside of the flood protected area, it's I know that in our area, there's only 2 communities that are part of the community rating system. And what that is, it's a local community working with the National Flood Insurance Program in order to implement strategies to minimize flood damages to the community. And you can actually, depending on the amount of activities you're involved with, you can actually lower the flood insurance premiums to your constituents by up to 45%. There is one community in California, I think it's Roseville, California, who they have they've got the maximum credits, and their residents enjoy a 45% break in their insurance premiums. That's something that we want to work with West Piston on. We have a mitigation specialist in our office. I know the former director, Jim Brzezina, who's sitting over here, he's active with his consulting firm. He's active in mitigation projects in areas, and that's something that we're going to work with Jim on to help West Piston, and also mitigation techniques to try to get homes out of the floodway. I mean, those are something that we can immediately do to try to lessen the pain for the increased insurance premiums that are going to come in the future.
Yeah, that's problematic for even a lot of Solomon's Creek and a lot of places, and it makes it very difficult for the people to sell their homes because it just ruins people's buying power. Because, as he's saying, those insurance premiums are so high that it's a whole other mortgage payment for some people. And I don't know. Affordability wise, it's I don't know. I mean, that's not your problem. I'm just saying it is really problematic, though.
No, but FEMA, the national government, they have to figure out a way to make flood insurance affordable.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, it's, flood insurance, floods, that's the most costliest disaster in the United States, more than fires. And yet, if you buy a home, you have to have fire insurance, but you don't need to get flood insurance. They should make flood insurance mandatory for all purchases across the nation, and that would dramatically lower the rates and make them affordable. And also stabilize the national insurance, National Flood Insurance Program funds.
I want to bring up Bear Creek Village. You wouldn't think of a flood there, but of course it did flood there.
It can flood anywhere. Yep.
That Cole Street.
Yeah, I'm out of the floodplain, but my neighbor's house does flood. That's how close I am. But that gets back to the point, should we all be collectively, helping each other in these? And in a lot of ways, I say yes. But the facts are, we don't. We have a system that we have, and that's what it is. So that's why I say, change. Figure out a way to change it if we can, if that's what we need to do. I'm not sure we have the political will to change a lot of this right now.
Our congressman was in Hazleton.
It's on a hill.
Can you talk a little bit about what the community can do to keep the levee system safe? And I'm sorry I have to say this, but this is my husband's big issue when he's not talking about it. Things that people do that put the levee at risk.
Oh, like ATVs and yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, they are out there.
We would love to be able to find something when we're on levee. We'd love to somebody to be able to call somebody and say, hey, there's something.
Yeah, we just got run over by an ATV on
Well,
the
something that we did a couple of years ago, we updated all the signage on the flood protection system. And I've seen crazy things. I've seen people set up an archery range and using the levee as a backdrop. I've seen people who just got new tires on their Jeep and they wanted to go up the levee to try them out. Fortunately, we were able to get a license plate, we got the police involved, and we were able to get reimbursement. But we have a lot of these issues with the ATV riders, dirt bike riders. Like, I can't be out there in a lawn chair screaming at these people all the time, but I think a few years ago when we put up the new signage, talking about it's flood control lands, no trespassing, I think that really tamped down a lot of the behavior that we don't like seeing out there. I mean, of course, having a flood protection system in an urban environment, it's impossible to keep people off the levee. I mean, people think that road on top of the levee is for recreation. It's not. It's for maintenance access, for not only for our maintenance vehicles, but also for during an emergency. But we allow safe and responsible recreation use up there. People can walk, ride their bike, their strollers. We allow that. We just discourage the bad behavior.
Is there a public information aspect that would help in that? I think if the newspaper got involved and it's there for all of us.
There's been lots of newspaper articles, but unfortunately, those kind of people don't read the news. They don't read the paper. I mean, they don't read the signs. They don't watch television.
Well, that would be for the people that do read and do use the levee. That this is what you need to do if you see it. I don't know reading a story would dissuade anybody from damaging behavior, but you might be able to get people that use it that are strolling and to call somebody.
I think we have a lot of that in information. Well, we do have that. We do have some signs that says if you see this kind of behavior, call this number. But this past year we initiated a new website. We have a lot of great information on there. I think we do have information about the use, public use of the flood protection system that's allowed. But there's a lot of other great information on there. And I encourage everyone in the room when you get an opportunity. Check us out. There's a lot of good information there. Pardon?
What's the website?
Real easy, www.lcfpa.org.
There's a lot of inappropriate use of the dike. I've run around and bike on the dikes, but it's also a good way of connecting in terms of recreation and leisure, because the more people are there, if we can figure out how to make it aware. And it is flood protection, it's just not recreation, but how do you marriage that message together that it works for everybody.
I think it's kind of remarkable. It's that the people who do use it, I think they consider it's their own, and there is a remarkable lack of trash and garbage that's left on the levee, because I think people do take responsibility in ownership of it, and it's these good people who are responsible and they utilize the system who kind of discourage the bad behavior that we don't like to see. I mean, it's really a small amount of bad behavior that we do see, but it is something that we try to tamp down as much as possible. I mean, if we can catch them, we'll take them to the courts and we'll get restitution.
Are there problem areas? Are there certain segments that are worse than others?
Yeah, there are some segments that are remote. I mean, they're kind of somewhat hidden, and Hanover, Plymouth, there's an area in West Wyoming. But we're aware of those areas and we're going to address them.
You talked about the retention ponds and the channeling of our feeder streams and things like that. Up above us is the Tri-City area of Binghamton, Endicott, and Johnstown. And that has seen a massive amount of development and asphalt put down, basically. And do those communities up there do anything to help the flow from staying there for a little while? Do you know?
Brian,
When you put in new development, you're supposed to, there's codes to try to minimize the impact of added runoff to the system. And so in the last probably 15 years, this idea of called best management practices have been in place. Okay. Now, whether they're completely implemented all the time, that's a question to look at. But the idea, so when you look at flood management, one way to alleviate it is to get the water away as fast as possible. That's channelizing it and getting it out. The other way is store it. So you put it in a big pond and you store it for a while and then you let it slowly drain. The third way, which is the new way, is to try to manage it on site and keep it on site. Okay? And so this is the idea where you have pervious pavements, infiltration gardens, and rain gardens and things like that. Some of them could be decorative. Some do work very well. The problem that we have seen with these, at least in my experience by monitoring this stuff, is the maintenance of them. So there's capital to get it built. It's built, it looks beautiful for a couple years, and someone's got to go and do something with it. But they never built in the plan to maintain it over a long period of time. So then you have some failures. So there's things that we need to do better to help alleviate that. All of these are, legitimate strategies to try to deal with manage a flood. Move it, store it, or keep it in its place.
Because they're moving it hurts us down here.
Yeah,
The guy in Chick-Shinny could be the same person saying.
I hear what you're saying. When I first moved here, I had this weird notion that, municipalities work together sometimes, and I found out that they don't. So you get a development that's put up at the top of the hill, they get all the tax dollars and they're doing well, but then if they move it downstream, nobody downstream is getting any benefit from that. So I hear what you're saying, and I've been a part of some of those discussions, and I've kind of scratched my head going, well, if you're delivering more water downstream, why aren't you help maintaining that system? But the political boundaries I found in this area are very small in terms of area. And water, like air, doesn't care about political boundaries. Right. It's going to move. And so in areas where I was part of a county-wide drainage system. So this idea of small municipalities having some ownership was kind of foreign to me, and it took me a little while to get used to that. So I started with a county-wide drainage system where municipalities didn't have these kinds of powers. And so it is what we have here. And I hear what you're saying.
Even when you leave that Tri-City area, you go west with the river, they're putting a new interstate in. Now, that area is flat and farmland, and it would flood onto the farmland and spread 500 feet. Well, Route 17 is being changed into an interstate, and the interstate's going to have and it's going to get pushed into our river faster.
So these things happen, and when you work, it depends on what level. So if you're working with an individual developer, and I've seen some of these meetings, they don't make money by putting in flood protection. They make the money by selling as much land as possible, or building, or whatever, developing what they can. But a part of that plan should be how are they going to manage large rain events and runoff events.
That topic, Scranton is in the process of trying to sell its sewer system and really didn't appear to accommodate for wastewater management, which was part of the system, and Pennsylvania American Water wasn't going to take it over. They're dealing with that now, but they're trying to talk about regional wastewater or rainwater management. And that's a lot of municipalities don't want to deal with it. That's Scranton's problem, but it's our problem too. What is the outlook of does that work in other areas? What's the likelihood of it happening there? Because it's going to affect us here. A regional rainwater management authority.
I personally think that would be a good idea. Whether it happens here or not is
Actually, the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority, they are exploring that idea.
They are, absolutely. So.
Yeah, but that goes back to political will. Right?
It goes back to political will. But sir, you kind of mentioned the upstream communities. We've been talking about the watershed here. Just so that everyone has like a visual representation of the size of it. It's the sub-basin here of the Susquehanna River, it's a 10,000 square miles. It extends up to the Finger Lakes in New York, as far east as the Catskill Mountains, as far west as Corning. So whatever happens in that upper watershed is going to affect us right here. Development, rainfall is going to have a major impact on what occurs right here in the valley.
Including a potential dam break. We didn't even talk about that. So what if one of these big stormwater dams do break?
I don't really know how many dams are on the Susquehanna.
Oh, on the Susquehanna? No, right, it's the Maryland one, and then there's the Sudbury one. They're on the tributaries.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty big ones.
If you ask me, I would like to see the Campbell's Ledge dammed up. It's not good for Tunkhannock, but we can make a nice hydroelectric dam right at Campbell's Ledge.
I'll put that on my to-do list.
Okay. No problem getting the funding, is there?
Mark, let me give you one comment, and that is that you came here tonight to talk about Agnes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that one of the lessons learned in 2011 is that Agnes is irrelevant anymore. When we went out and put out our notifications to communities, we said the water is going to be where it was in 1972 during Agnes. The problem is that we are 2, if not 3 generations of homeowners down the road, as well as generations of people who have no clue who the Lady Agnes was. So, as Chris has alluded to, the flood warning system that is going to be becoming operational, and there is already one that the authority has been using since 2003, that's how we need to communicate this information to the people, that here's what's happening today, and put it in terms that they understand. You know, there's a couple of other things that we learned about in 2011. And one is that in major events, you may as well throw your cell phone in the garbage because it doesn't work. Right. We ended up having to go back and pulling out our 2-way radios during that event to give us the correlation that we needed to do that. So there were a lot of lessons learned. We're very fortunate that we have a tremendous engineering community in this valley that came out and assisted us and put eyes on the ground and solved an awful lot of problems out there on the spot. They knew what to do. They had the people, because, you know, Chris's whole outfit is all of 8 people to maintain 16 miles of levee. So you have to understand that for 364 days a year, it's a great walking and biking and hiking trail. But that one day of year, those guys make sure that it's ready to do what it was designed for.
That is actually a brilliant point you said about not knowing about Agnes. I mean, obviously being in this line of work, you know, I know the hurricane fairly well, but I actually had a lot of my friends texting me going, dude, where are they talking about? Like, you study. I'm like, no, you got to go. Like, you got to go. And that was a thing not a lot of younger people were familiar with exactly the boundaries. And like you said, it's something you don't realize until, you know, at that point, oh, wait, this isn't working the way we thought it was.
The other thing that we were not prepared for in 2011 was social media. It was completely something new. Anybody can go out, take a picture, say anything that they wanted to say about it, and we were fighting that tooth and nail with the rumor control office.
Jim brought up a good point about losing communication. And I get that's what we talk about for emergency and management is what happens if. And so when you practice this, one of the common things we do when we try to deal with water systems, like what happens when communication does fail? How are you going to communicate across? And that's hard to do, even if you think about it yourself. You know, you always make the assumption these phones are here, whatever, but what if they're not? What other alternative do you have to communicate to other people? We see that right now in Puerto Rico. from what's been happening. That power grid is out. Cell phone towers are out. If we're so dependent on something that requires to be charged, and I've heard people say, well, I'll just charge it in my car. But if the power is out, you can't get the gas out of the tanks into your car. You eventually run out of gas. What are you going to really do? Can you prepare yourself for that? Most people can't. It's a difficult situation. I hope we don't lose our power for that long, but I was part of the power outage for Sandy for that week or whatever. My kids were out of the house. I found another place for them to live. I was the only one in that house with no heat. I had to deal with it. I had the fuel on site. I had the heating source ready to go. I had it going. I had it going. Every day I added to my plan to keep my house working. But I moved the kids out. So it was just me dealing with it. So these are things you got to think about in any kind of emergency or unexpected event. Yeah.
In preparing, the question is, where do you go when you evacuate? And there are shelters. Is there some source of those shelters? Can you look on the internet and find out the list of shelters in the valley? Like I know in 11, GA High School was a shelter. Mm-hmm. Is there a list of shelters somewhere that we could prepare and look at the path up there and practice, going to the shelter?
Well, I do know that Luzerne County Emergency Management Agency, they keep a list of such things. I think they could be a resource for those type of questions. That'd be a good first stop.
Well, this has been fantastic. It's been enlightening. I want to thank Chris, Brian, and Kathy again, our panelists. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I hope you learned as much as I did. And hopefully we'll be able to do more panel discussions on different topics going forward. But I think this is a fantastic start, and thank you very much.
Thank you.